Hey guys, so I'm gonna go through Sakuraba's book here. This is by Sakuraba. I think it's like a Q&A type of thing. We're just gonna go through his first chapter when he on like becoming a mixed martial artist. In Japanese, it's like page 106 through 112, and then just kind of look it through. This he talks about the beginning of how he got into mixed martial arts, and he says that he wasn't really, he had just been a professional wrestler, and he was just kind of thinking like, it was like, I'm going to try it once. I'm going to do Pride once. I'm going to do the UFC once, just as something to have done, not necessarily like this is what I'm going to do. And when he talks about mixed martial arts, he talks about the freedom the freedom and the lack of constraints that there is in maybe amateur wrestling, for example. And the example that he gives is like, let's say you go out to a field and there isn't any path, and you're told that you can run on this path however you want to, on this field however you want to. But then through that field you put a road or just a small little path through it. And he says when there is a path, people they have the inkling to stay along and run along that path. So, and he explains it as just his preference. He prefers the lack of rules. And he talks about actually in the beginning of Pride 1 and Pride 2. I guess there was no Pride 1, it was just Pride, and then there was Pride 2. But and 2 was his debut into Pride, and I think mixed martial arts. But when he talks about Pride, he talks about how the rules were changing as the fights progressed. So I mean that was just an interesting point. But he says he liked that. He liked the lack of rules, the lack of constraints. He could strike, he could go for a submission. I thought that was a really interesting, my chickens are going crazy. I thought that was a really interesting perspective. The more I read about Sakuraba, the more I realize he's really in touch with himself, and he's in touch in understanding his likes and dislikes. And I think that's an asset. And once you understand that, you understand yourself better, you're able to go and do what you like, and stay away from what you don't like, and try new things that you think you would like, as opposed to things that you're not going to like. Another thing in this first section that was really insightful, but he talks about kind of chaining submissions together. And I'm trying to find the exact, I should have written down a translation, but I didn't. But here it is. So he talks about, he doesn't go about it as like, I'm going to finish this guy with certainty, right? I'm going to definitely submit him. He goes about it with maybe an 80-90% effort to finish the guy. And when he gets to, let's say he gets the arm, right? And as he's attacking the arm, maybe the arm gets away, and he's already looking for the transition to go to the neck. And then the guy gets out of the neck away, then he goes to the transition to take the back and to maintain the back, and then spawn new attacks from that position. This was a really interesting. He's like, man, I would be pretty lucky if I could get the submission here, right? But if I don't get the submission, then I'm just gonna move on to the next one. So he's kind of thinking ahead. He gives himself the opportunity to be continuous with his attacks, rather than like a very regimented, this is how it must be. I must get the arm bar and finish the arm bar. it's a very more of a fluid approach. And I thought that was really interesting, because you talk about people talk about setting up strategies and game plans to finish from certain positions, or to look for finishes from certain positions, but he isn't necessarily looking for finishes from a certain position, although he is initially. He's looking to get the finish, but the finish is set up from one submission to the next submission. And in his in his Pride 2 debut, he talks about how he had just transferred dojos, and he wasn't able to train as much. He said the most that he did was some running in preparation for the match, and so as a result, he wasn't able to transition. And I haven't seen the Pride 2 debut, but it would be interesting to see his progression. But he says, as a result, I wasn't thinking clearly, and I wasn't able to transition through those submissions like I would have liked to. I thought that was a really interesting observation. And I think in preparation for Pride 3 against Carlos Newton, he went to Japan, or sorry, he moved from Japan to Los Angeles to train at Marco Faust. I gotta look up the name in English, but because Takeda's dojo hadn't been up and running yet, he was forced to go find a place to train in Los Angeles, and he talks very highly about that experience. One more kind of analogy that he gives when he talks about kind of transitioning and being able to not just be like a one-shot finisher, but being able to transition from one attack to the next attack. He makes an example by talking about a person who's in sales, right? And he says if this person's asset in sales is just to talk, and the person's not able to connect with the buyer, they've lost the chance to sell. But if that salesman has more than one kind of trade, and he has the trade of, or the technique to listen, then he's going to have an opportunity to create, to listen to what the consumer wants and change how he's talking in order to capture that sale. And he kind of equates that having transitions and multiple attacks from each submission, I think is like having different skills, right? And being able to go from one skill to the next skill when you realize, oh, this isn't quite working as well as it should have, I need to transition to something else. And so you can tell, again, I talked about how Sakuraba is known as the IQ wrestler, or IQ for doing IQ wrestling, an intelligent style of cerebral analytical wrestling. He also had after beating 4 of the Gracies, he gets the name, Gracie Hunter. It might not even have been with the 4th one. I think Henzo might have been, Hien or Henzo might have been the last one of his victories. But I thought that was, it's really interesting that Sakuraba is, as an entertainer as he is, he's still also like a very cerebral, very analytical, very thoughtful and intentional with his approach in his training and his approach in his fights, in his competition. I think that's something that we can all learn from. So yeah, first thing is, in summary, just chaining things together, finding continuity. A big quote in here is don't just be like a one-shot knockout, but have a technique that's appropriate, right? That's appropriate for that situation, for that context, and be able to connect those different attacks at all times. And then the last phrase, it says, in any occupation or career, having this ability is important. Alright, so that's the first part. If you guys like it, please let me know if you want to hear more. I'm going to put up maybe 4 or 5 more of these. And if you guys want more, it's a whole book here. If you read Japanese, 読想力は本当に面白い本だと思うので、ぜひ読んでみてください。トレーニング方法だけじゃなくて、桜庭の子供から大人への成長も書いてあるけど、そのトレーニングから社会に役立つ行動、トレーニングからその人生に役立つ、人生のメリットの説明がよく書かれてあるので、ぜひおすすめします。Check it out, guys. I'll talk to you guys soon.